Welcome back to Open Line. Our topic tonight, women in the workforce. We do want to hear from you tonight. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, anything you want to share with us, give us a call. We've got that phone number on the bottom of your screen. We'd love to hear your input as well. But I want to circle back on one thing about what employers can do, what kind of their role in all of this is to not only keep employees happy, but maybe make their lives a little bit easier.
Absolutely, and it's about making your employees' lives easier, but it's really about protecting your bottom line. Because if you can keep women in your workforce, you know, it costs employers money to have to hire and train, and then you get somebody you really like, and then she has to leave because she can't find affordable, high-quality childcare. So it's about those employees, but it's really about your workforce. And so there's all sorts of things that we can do, that employers can do, that so many in Nashville are already doing. And so, for instance, I was actually speaking to a group at the Chamber about reasonable pregnancy accommodations. And again, this is a bottle of water and a chair, not 6 weeks with your feet up in a recliner. And so many of those employers said, well, I'm already doing that. I can't believe the law doesn't already require that. And if I'm doing it as an employer, then I really would like all employers to have to do it, just from a competitive perspective. And so if we pass laws like it's called the Tennessee Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. So that was a bipartisan proposal last year that would have required an employer to make reasonable pregnancy accommodations unless they were able to show undue hardship that had no significant fiscal impact on those employers. Because again, it's the small things that then result in women being able to stay in the workforce.
It seems like that would be a pretty minimal effort, you know, just to make sure, like you said, we're not asking for the world here. Just a bottle of water goes a long way.
And I think about that just on a personal perspective. You know, I've got 2 kids, and if my employer had said, you know, if my doctor said, you know, in order to have a healthy pregnancy, you need to have a chair or you need to have a bottle of water, and my employer said no, I'd be like, okay, then I quit. But for so many women in Tennessee, we know that's not an option, right? Because you're about to put another mouth to feed around your table.
Need the money.
So you need the money, and you don't have that choice. And you know, there were a couple of women in Memphis actually who unfortunately did lose their babies because they were working at a plant where they were required to lift heavy things. They were packing cell phones, and they were forced to lift these heavy boxes even though their doctors had told them not to. And it just, no woman should have to make that sort of choice, and that is something that's solvable by public policy.
And also, Lori, you were talking about just the education aspect, people that maybe are interested in going back to school, and how employers are being a little more accommodating with that and helping them along that path.
Yeah, I think that employers are starting to see the payoff in terms of retaining employees when you help someone build their career pathway. Having clear, distinct pathways is really important. And for a lot of organizations, when we talk about that, we did a study in 2017 of employers in the region, 12 employers. We surveyed about 32,000 people. We got about 8,400 responses back. And more than half of those folks did not know the payoff for education. And so, but when we talked to the employers about it, they said, well, we have a notebook in HR that tells you like what our career ladders are. And so I think it's important that that employers realize you have to communicate those to employees, because when an employer supports someone going back to school and earning a credential to grow in their workplace, they're creating retention. Employees are more likely to stay. They'll feel more connected to that employer. And so I think for a long-term strategy of retention, that's one way that you can do it. And then you have to allow employees to continue to grow. So those pathways are so important. You know, we talk about stackable credentials, and you start with maybe a short-term credential of 6 months, but then over time you earn a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree. And you can see where those pathways will lead. And most of the time they lead to pretty significant wage growth, you know, over the course of someone's career.
And a lot of these things are just small things employers can take upon themselves to do. They don't have to wait for a bill to be passed, you know, a law. I mean, you know, it really can be kind of on them. And it seems like more and more are willing to do that, or at least considering it, which, like you said, can have a big payoff.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's look back at some of the other things we were talking about earlier about just kind of the overall challenges that women are facing. I want to revisit some of these. We're talking about the child care issues, transportation issues. I mean, it's a long list of things that women really have to juggle here that makes their lives a little bit harder. And just the effect that that can have on not only them, but their families.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we see women, you know, again, with women being more than 50% of families having female breadwinners, when you take when that woman has to then decide to stay at home, you're affecting her whole family, right? And we know in particular that the problem is particularly prevalent with those single moms and the single dads. So again, when we're talking about economic security, so that's enough money to pay your bills and save a little bit for retirement or emergencies. So you're not probably taking fancy vacations. You are making ends meet and saving a little bit in case your brake pad goes out or something like that. 73% of our state's single moms are living below the economic security line, and 51% of our single dads, or families headed by single dads. So think about the impact that has on all those children too. And so married families are doing better, but we've still got 34% of our married parents living below economic security. And so we see this, this isn't a problem with just a handful of families in Tennessee. It's really hundreds of thousands of families that stand to benefit.
And tell us again where Tennessee ranks on some of these things, because we're not looking too good on some of these lists.
Yeah, so there's lots of room for improvement, right? We're 41st in the nation when it comes to families living without that economic security. We're 43rd in the labor force participation gap. Big numbers are, of course, bad. So the higher we move up, the more families will benefit.
And, there may be some things we can kind of steal from some other states who are a little higher on that list. What have you seen kind of in some other instances of what other places have done that has paid off? And maybe, things that we can kind of think about doing here in Tennessee?
Well, so here's sort of an unusual idea that places like the Republican governor in Maryland led the way on this, or Louisiana, which is not typically known as sort of, one of those dark blue states. And that was prohibiting folks from being punished, employers can't punish their employees if they talk about their salaries. So I'm allowed to compare my salary with my male employee to, see if it's fair, see what the wage gap is there, and I can't be punished by my employer for that. So some of it is just about bringing some transparency into the workplace. So there's a Tennessee Pay Equality Act that would have our employers do the same thing. And then there's again a lot that happens just at the municipal level. So whether that's in Nashville or it's in cities in Georgia or North Carolina or Missouri, we see cities really often leading the way. So it could be that a city just decides that I'm not going to ask women who are coming to interview for jobs, I'm not going to ask them what their past salary is, their salary history, because often those women have already they were paid less than they were worth. And so to ask women about their salary history is sometimes to peg them to a salary that's lower than maybe you would pay a man. And so some cities you see banning salary history questions, even in their own workforces. Sometimes the governments can lead the way first by trying it with their own workforce, proving that they're kind of getting a proof of concept, and then expanding it to the state as a whole. Because that way your policymakers see, well, the city did this and its economy didn't collapse, so maybe we could try it
We
here.
can look into that.
Yeah, exactly.
And tell me a little more about the Tennessee Pay Equality Act. What would that do? Where does that stand?
Yeah, I mean, so it's not crazy. I don't know what crazy would be, but it's not saying that every woman must make exactly what a man makes or anything like that. In Louisiana, for instance, they said we're not going to have wage discrimination in our public sector jobs. So same experience, same education, same job, men and women get paid the same. But often it's just, I can't fire you if you ask your male colleague how much he makes. So it's just kind of transparency. It's allowing employees to have conversations like that so they can sort of take things into their own hands if they want to go ask for a raise. They could be fully armed with the information about, I'm being paid less than my male colleagues, and I don't think that's fair. Or, I also think our employers benefit too when employees feel empowered to have conversations like that, and when they know that they're valued no matter their gender.
And Laura, tell us again about kind of what's going on at the Nashville Chamber with the Reconnect Cafe, and just kind of what you guys are doing to ensure women are treated fairly and able to get the jobs that they want to get.
Sure. Well, we have the work of the cafes, which is at 3 locations of Nashville State, and really it's providing wraparound services to any adult who wants to return to school, and so up to a bachelor's degree. But we really sort of meet them where they are, create an individualized plan, and then continue to check in with them. We call it gentle nudges, but what we really do is check in at key times of the semester to see, how are you doing in classes, how are things going, finals are coming up, here's some study resources. Not necessarily because they need us, but we want to stay near the top of their inbox for when they do need us. So we do a lot of checking in and just providing resources. so that people can stay connected. They can have the new technology resources. We like to share apps that are helpful and those kinds of things so that people can just stay on the right path to get to completing that degree.
And so we really don't have to address all of these issues at the state level. You guys are doing so much on a local level. It's kind of all of the above, I guess,
well,
is
I think
necessary.
it's like Shauna said, it's sort of a grassroots versus policy, and we have to do it together. It has to be both. It can't just be one, because the policy has to change to support the other change in our community. And so the grassroots stuff is great, but the policy stuff is just as important.
And the state does, as you've said, there's room to improve as far as what the state can do.
And there's also really cool ways that our state is leading the way. Like one of the things that I learned is that Tennessee, I've not ever worked for the state, but I know that state employees actually get up to 4 months of unpaid leave to stay home after you've had a baby to take care of that child. So federal law just requires 12 weeks, so our state actually goes all the way up to 16. So that's a great step in the right direction, and there's lots more that we can do to follow the leadership of those legislators who passed that law, just to help us retain our workforce.
Very good. All right, we're going to take another quick break, and we will be right back with more Open Line. Stay with us.